Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan.
Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Prime Minister Ismail Sabri has inked a deal with the Pakatan Harapan coalition, dubbed the Memorandum of Understanding on Transformation and Political Stability. The deal covers six key reforms, which include the management of the pandemic and its recovery, good governance, parliamentary reforms, judicial independence, fulfilling the Malaysia Agreement 1963, and finally, the formation of a steering committee. Now, this bipartisan MOU is being dubbed a historic accord, which is said to will end decades of winner-takes-all politics. But will it? Nazmi Ahmad is the MP of Setiawangsa. He joins us now. He's also the Organising Secretary for PKR. Nazmi, good evening. Thank you for being on the show tonight. Now, I just detailed the six key reform areas, and we'll find out the details of what's going to be done with each of these areas once that document is made public tomorrow. But can you help us understand what Pakatan is offering in exchange for these potential reforms?
Yeah, hi Melisa, good to see you. Well, I think for Pakatan Harapan, this was not an easy decision. On one side, we have people who say that they're tired of the political wranglings, since last year when the Pakatan government fell. On the other side, you have people who felt that who feels that we should not be seen as compromising. But I think if we look at the details, and I know that officially it's not out yet, although a lot of the media has been reporting about it, we have been pushing the maximum possible demands in terms of not only parliamentary independence, institutional reforms, economic response to the COVID pandemic. And we feel that, if the government is agreeable to this, or at least, we see an indication that they're willing to implement this, and after what we've gone through in the previous year with the emergency and the spiraling COVID cases, I think we need to give this a chance.
Nazmi, can you tell us very briefly what makes this moment different from the moment which Muhyiddin Yassin, then head of the Pakatan National Government, offered his deal, his olive branch to Pakatan Harapan?
Okay, this talks about negotiating with the government. Previously it was dubbed the Confidence Supply Agreement, as used in many other parliamentary democracies. Last year, we had representatives from the three parties, including Anthony Loh, Saifuddin Nasution, joining the meetings. But after that, it went to nothing, and no conclusion. They couldn't meet our demands. Then what happened was that just before the fall of the Muhyiddin government, there were efforts to revive the CSA, but it was not done, at least not at a Pakatan level. It was done by certain individuals in certain parties, by a government that was totally discredited, and when Muhyiddin has already lost his numbers. So, that's a totally different deal for us compared to this, when we are having a new prime minister who has proven, at the very least through the declarations to the palace, his numbers. I know that the parties and the ministers are largely the same, but at least it's a new prime minister, it's a new administration, and he's shown the willingness, and the negotiation is done on an official basis with the coalition. So I think on that basis, that's the difference with what we had with, or what was elaborated with Muhyiddin. And this is certainly not a CSA, because if you look at the clause, it leaves us a lot of room even to not support, for example, the budget if there's no negotiation with us, or even in terms of confidence bills and whatnot. So this.
Okay. That's quite interesting.
Yes,
so does this MOU detail deal breakers for Pakatan Harapan?
Yes. We have things like anti-hopping law, Undi 18, the reform of the select committees, those things, the independence of Parliament. And the proviso that we have is that, it's all being guided by a Jawatankuasa Pemandu or steering committee that sits every 2 weeks, that must meet every 2 weeks. And there's certain timelines in place mentioned for the implementation. So that to us is very crucial because, yes, I mean, anyone will promise anything if they're desperate. But that sort of elements and the fact that we still we were not required to give a blank check to the government. I think that was why we decided to go in with this agreement or memorandum.
Nazmi, is this an agreement with Ismail Sabri specifically or with the larger government? Because there's some differences in the way this story is being reported in, I believe, the Star, it's Pakatan Perikatan deal and so on and so forth. And I note that no major Bersatu politicians were part of the signing. Could you explain the politics of that?
Well, what do you call that? As far as I know, the version that I've seen is that the signing or this memorandum will continue to hold. It's between the three or now four Pakatan parties. Sorry, I forgot to mention APCO just now. The four Pakatan parties with the Prime Minister. So it's with Ismail's administration. So if there is another administration, then the memorandum probably collapse. I mean, I would say, but I think we are looking at the next year. The commitment is not to have elections before July 2022, which is about less than a year. Yeah. So I think that's the focus.
Okay, can I just come back to something you said a little earlier? You said, anyone can promise anything, right? And there is a trust deficit in society towards our institutions. There is a deep suspicion that this is a ploy to buy time. Can you explain how you're going to communicate this deal, this agreement, this MOU to your constituents, your voters, your supporters? How much of the buy-in of the public is needed for this to be a success?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been asking some of my constituents to tune in tonight so that I can explain to them. But, the key part, I think, we've seen what happened since the collapse of Pakatan Harapan. The remaining PH jumped. We were committed to the agenda and whatnot. We tried to make the last 1 year plus under Muhyiddin work. Emergency, he tried to do emergency once and then he failed and then he managed to do it the second time. Parliament was suspended. He got into a constitutional crisis with the palace. So, that was the whole spate of thing while, COVID was rising to terrible levels. So I think for a lot of us, we look back. And of course, I mean, for many in the opposition, it's not an easy decision, whether it's personally, but most importantly in matters of principle. But, there are issues. JFK famously said, you can compromise on issues. And we think that this is where there's an opening and we can push the reforms that we've wanted so hard, anti-hopping, parliamentary reforms, select committees. These are the things that we pushed for so hard all these years. Even to be fair, some of it were not fully implemented during our time in government. So this is the time to make use of it and at the same time provide some stability to the political scenario.
Right. Thank you so much for being on the show tonight. That was Setiawangsa MP, Nik Nazmi, Nik Ahmad. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll come back and speak to some political analysts. So stay tuned.
Amanah di tangan kita. Adat, budaya dan semangat menjadi kesinambungan perpaduan tanah air yang tercinta. Berteraskan adab yang terpahat di jiwa dan raga. Marilah bersama kita membina negara Malaysia.
Untuk memastikan Malaysia ada ke depan kita boleh maju. Induknya adalah Melayu.
Balik kepada seperti orang yang membuat polisi.
Kalau itu yang dikehendaki, fine. Mungkin kita berbeza pandangan.
Tapi kita mempunyai kuasa yang boleh menentukan budaya di masa hadapan.
Polisi yang mesra wanita sudah tentu dia akan datang daripada pemimpin wanita.
Sama Mahat Tahfiz Jawabannya.
Bila sentuh soal berita, tiada masa untuk tunggu. Kepada anda kami bawakan fakta.
Hi, you're watching Consider This. I'm Melisa. Idris. With me is Sharaad, Kuttan. We're discussing the Memorandum of Understanding on Transformation and Political Stability that was inked by Prime Minister Ismail Sabri government and Pakatan Harapan earlier today. Political scientist Wong Huat joins us on the line now. Good evening, Huat. Thank you for being on the show. We've been talking about CSAs, company supply agreements, for a while now. Do you consider this a form of a CSA, or is it something different? Looking at the details, what would you like to see to convince you to ensure that this MOU or CSA or whatever you want to call it, that it will work, that it will definitely be a game changer for the political landscape?
Yes, this is a confidence and supply agreement. A CSA would have two elements. They would define that the opposition is going to either support or remain neutral when you come to a vote on confidence or anything with that implications. And next is about budget. And both of these items, you can actually find it in the memorandum. So you can call Malaysia lockdown as MCO, EMCO, but internationally it's just lockdown. So I don't see a fundamental difference. And I believe this is a groundbreaking development. In the short term, it would give us political stability, and both the government and the opposition have their interest. It's in their interest to observe this CSA. The government certainly needs to pass its budgets in less than 2 months' time. And the opposition cannot overthrow the government now, so they would benefit from institutional reform. But in the longer run, this is going to change our politics, hopefully permanently for better. The reason being that after 2015, we're probably going to have a hung parliament, and a CSA would allow us, would show us the way how to deal with a more vibrant and fluid parliament.
Huat, Muhyiddin Yassin, when he headed the Pakatan National Government, made a similar type of offer to the parliamentary opposition, didn't go anywhere. This time around, we not only had the offer, but we also had negotiations. The outcome of these negotiations, overall, do you think they're a better deal than what potentially Muhyiddin was offering?
It's very hard to say what ultimately Muhyiddin would have offered if he got a chance to continue the negotiation. But as it is now, I think this is quite good. It's certainly not perfect, but I believe we all should give peace a chance.
Okay, all right. Can I ask you to elaborate on that, Huat? Because it's quite a big claim for you to say that this is going to change the nature of politics, the way politics is being done, especially since politics has been done in a very self-serving way for many, many years. A spiteful rhetorics, one-upmanship, a mindless politicking. Can you explain why you wrote, and if I may quote you, you say this CSA gives major parties a chance to learn how to coexist with each other and compete professionally. So after this, we won't have to worry about party hopping or coalition hopping or frequent changes of prime ministers after GE15. Can you elaborate a little bit?
Sure. Our politics have been driven by this winner-takes-all attitude or mentality, just like gamblers who believe their luck will be good. So when the card is in their hand, they want to go all the way out and to maximize their gain. But of course, when the table gets turned around, you have a lot of trouble. What happened now is that politicians get to become more realistic. They accept that they can no longer assume they always will be the winner. So therefore, they want a system that is fairer, that is more stable. So all they want is to stay in the game and hopefully win as much time as possible. But they dare not to think they would be the winner all the way. And this makes politics much more rational because you have to get a better outcome by accepting that your rival will remain in the scenes. You can't eliminate them. In a way that our politics get more professionalized because you just have to look at sports as an example. Athletes would compete against each other, but no one would try to eliminate their rival because that would destroy the game. And our politics in the past has always been aiming at how to destroy their enemies. Now things are changing. People are talking about how they can collaborate now between elections. Then you go into elections, you compete again. And after elections, you might need to pick some of them as your government partners or your CSA partner. So all this constrain our politicians and political parties from going too far.
Okay, very quickly, there are people who are skeptical, critical, and so on and so forth. What do you say to people who don't believe that this is really the game changer it seems to be?
It is perfectly understandable if you are cynical, but let me say this. Politics is not love. You do not need your politicians to be sincere. You only need them to be useful. And insincere politicians will be very useful if they are desperate. And this is the best time that we are looking at. Both sides have no chance to claim that they're going to win the next election big. And therefore, but at the same time, they fear they're going to lose more. They are desperate. And this is the reason why we are seeing all these changes. There's nothing in there that could have stopped Pakatan Harapan to introduce, for example, a term limit on the Prime Minister in the 22 months. No one would actually oppose that. But why was that not tabled? Yeah.
Do you know what? Thank you for explaining that. That was a good perspective. That was political scientist Wong Huat. We're going to take another quick break. We'll be back with more. Stay tuned.
Ingin jual dan beli kereta dengan amanah di tangan kita. Adat, budaya dan semangat menjadi kesinambungan perpaduan tanah air yang tercinta. Berteraskan adab yang terpahat di jiwa dan raga. Marilah bersama kita membina negara Malaysia.
Thank you so much for staying with Sharaad and I on Consider This. Joining us now is political analyst Ihsan. He's a senior fellow at the Singapore Institute of International Affairs. Ihsan, good evening. Now, you've criticized the Pakatan Harapan Reform Pact with Ismail Sabri's government. You've called it detrimental and harmful brand of Malaysian politics. You've said that the opposition had effectively emasculated themselves. Very strong opinions. Can you explain why you've made these claims?
Well, you see, in more mature democracy, where you have both sides of the political divide being, for example, equally competent in running the country, and both sides being equally clean in terms of, no corruptions and so on, then I think it's perfectly fine to have a temporary confidence and supply agreement whereby, both sides of the political divide, which are, divided only by ideology and not anything else, could come together and run the country in a time of emergency. I fully agree with that. I would even agree with, for example, the ruling coalition today and the opposition of this country coming together just for that so-called reform proposals, right? Just for passing those laws and so on. But we don't quite know yet what are actually in the content of those MOUs. But if it is effectively a confidence and supply agreement whereby the opposition will support the government, let's say for a period of time and so on, I think it's very dangerous for this country because the ruling coalition is well known to have elements which are extremely corrupt, which have misused, and it's very likely to continue to abuse and misuse powers, and they have proven themselves to be utterly incompetent in countering the pandemic as well as in reviving the economy. And now you have these same people in the cabinet making the major decisions for this country, and there's no check and balance basically, with the major blocks of the opposition effectively supporting this government. So what do we have here? Are we like a one-party state with token opposition? Shall we call it flower vest opposition? And supporting this government even if it is down the road of failure? I think that's a very dangerous proposition. Thank you.
Right. Ihsan, I can't speak on behalf of Pakatan Harapan, but I think to some extent, Lim Kit Siang has addressed this just today in a piece he wrote, that this is not in any way a blank check for the current government. But there is a problem for Pakatan. There is no effective way to change government at this point in time. And so in some sense, this is seen as the best deal forward, considering the vulnerabilities that Ismail Sabri manifests when he, kind of reached out across the aisle. He needs the help of the federal opposition to counter whatever, tensions there are in his own coalition. I mean, don't you think that, in some sense, that this might not be perfect, but this is a very good start in terms of restarting the reform agenda?
Well, as I said, if you are talking about passing those reform agendas, I agree. But if you are talking about essentially what was it, I think there's trickling out some details of the agreements, like no election before next year and so on, and just the opposition to support the government. I mean, to what extent? I mean, we are still have mounting pandemic numbers. So if you support this government, then you are equally responsible for the failure of this government. Then come next round of election, how would I, as a voter, make the decision? Both sides are equally guilty for running this country down. So how would I make that choice?
Right. Very quickly, Ihsan, if I just may hone into one of the reforms, and I take your point about detractors not being happy with this MOU, but one of the key reforms was about fulfilling Malaysia Agreement 1963, and that's been on the table for the longest time. What real deliverables are you hoping to see in this MOU?
I wonder what is that thing about MA63. Successive governments have been promising all these sort of wonderful, changes about that could bring about more autonomy and so on. At the end of the day, I don't see quite a lot of autonomy for either Sabah or Sarawak. Sarawak by force, grab some autonomy. That's only because the ruling coalition needs their votes. Other than that, I don't see the federal government be ever sincere in granting more autonomy to Sabah and Sarawak. I wonder how many of these so-called reform proposals items would actually be passed at the end of the day.
All right, Oisan, thank you for being on the show tonight. That was political analyst Oisan wrapping up this episode of Consider This. But before we leave you, a reminder that you can get the latest COVID-19 vaccine information on our website, astro.com, as well as our app. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan, signing off for the evening.
We will be back same time tomorrow. Till then, good night.